And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get two gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 304. Today's episode is all about reclaiming the self, how a kidnapping exposed deep self-abandonment.
I think about that morning when I stood there and looked at myself in the mirror. I knew something was going to happen. I knew something was off. I knew I wasn't supposed to be leaving that house and getting in that car and going on that mission. And I remember, oh man, just as clear as day, I remember the dress I was wearing, looking at myself in the mirror, and I said out loud, "Jess, do you want to do this?" Knew the answer was no, but I was so afraid of what other people would think of me. I was afraid of looking like a moron, pathetic, or, paranoid, being a hysterical woman in the field and, all the things. And I took one last look at myself and I walked away. Like I abandoned myself in that moment. I walked away from myself, and it was the most important decision I've ever made in my life.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. Do you ever catch yourself doubting your own judgment? Or maybe hiding parts of who you truly are, like your emotions or your beliefs or ideas, just to blend into the crowd or keep the peace? I'm talking about those moments when you shrink back, tuck your thoughts away, and become invisible, all to avoid ruffling someone else's feathers. Or the times that you minimize your feelings, making them feel insignificant just because you believe that maybe they don't matter, or it's just not you to make waves. This is the quiet curse of self-abandonment. It's the process of slowly stripping away your self-worth, neglecting your own needs, and forgetting that your voice too deserves to be heard. Self-abandonment is kind of tricky because often we do it without even realizing it, because we're so focused on everyone else that we don't even really notice ourselves, which is how the self-abandonment happens in the first place. But let me know if any of these resonate. You second-guess your decisions, or you let others choose for you. You put other people first, often at your own expense. You're a perfectionist with sometimes unreachable goals. You criticize yourself when you fall short of your own, often unrealistic standards. You push down your feelings, or you avoid or numb the discomfort. You don't have a whole lot of personal boundaries. I have 1,000 small stories of turning away from myself and a few really big ones, where I ignored that inner voice only to be left feeling lost and more alone than ever. I can specifically remember a memory in college when I was crouched over a toilet, purging my food for the 5th time that week, thinking, this could become a bigger problem if I keep doing this. Well, that's not what I wanted to hear at the moment, so mute. Cut to a serious case of bulimia that consumed my life for the next 10 years. Or the time sitting waiting for my ex-boyfriend to pick me up, knowing that he was manipulating me, but also being so wrapped up in wanting to feel wanted that I ignored my knowing, only to end up in my darkest rock bottom thus far. I could go on, but I'm going to spare you. So why do we self-abandon in the first place? Usually it begins in childhood. Maybe the adults in your life didn't meet your needs very well, so you felt unloved or insignificant. Or you grew up in an unpredictable or chaotic environment, so you learned to hide your true self to avoid conflict or pain. So you learned to mute your feelings or disregard your needs and question your self-worth. And then, as an adult, you replayed these patterns from childhood. So you might have chosen friends or partners who treat you poorly because it's familiar. And without realizing it, you started to do the same to yourself. You became an expert in self-abandonment because it's what you learned growing up. Or maybe you were kidnapped by pirates in Somalia because you ignored your intuition. Too specific? Well, we'll get there. It's wild. Whatever it stemmed from, it's a destructive pattern. And it's a survival tactic that causes us to turn off one of our deepest powers. So how do we reconnect with ourselves? Well, that's what we're talking about today. And our guest is Jessica Buchanan. She's a teacher, a New York Times bestselling author, TEDx speaker, and a kidnapping survivor. She was named one of the 150 fearless women who shake the world by Newsweek, and she speaks professionally about her kidnapping experience and rescue by the SEAL team for audiences all over the world. 3 key things we will learn are the difference between an option and a choice, how to recognize our own patterns of self-abandonment, and how to safeguard your mind from fear and even psychosis. I used to be one of those people who had grand plans for a big, healthy meal every Sunday night, and I'd make these elaborate meal plans, buy all the ingredients, and then Wednesday would roll around and I'd be staring at that wilted spinach, ordering takeout again. Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, and that's why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's so perfect for those nights when you have no energy left. What I love most is their smart cart technology. It actually learns what I like and what I will actually cook. So no more buying ingredients for recipes that I'll never make. Everything that shows up, I actually use. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners, only high quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry brands like Vital Farms and Ithaca Hummus that I already trust. The time I've gotten back has been incredible. Instead of spending Sunday meal planning, I'm doing things that actually matter to me. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
And now let's welcome Jessica Buchanan to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I usually ask what inspired people's work, but you have one of the craziest stories I have ever heard of. So I feel like we should start there.
Okay, well, I think the crazy story happened because of my inspiration for my work. Even though it was different then than it is now. I'm actually a teacher by profession. And so when I was finishing up my teaching degree way like many lifetimes ago, I felt compelled. I got this like summer teaching position, teaching in like the back country somewhere in Honduras, and got bit by like the travel bug, and that really got into my blood. And so when I was looking for student teaching opportunities and looking around at all the like public schools outside of Philadelphia where I was going to college, it just didn't really like scratch that itch that I had for adventure and to do something a little bit more purpose driven, I think. And so I found a school in Nairobi, Kenya, that would take me on, and I did my student teaching there, and then they offered me a position, and so I took it, and I started teaching at an international school in Nairobi. And then I met my husband a couple months later while I was out with some teachers dancing one Saturday night, and that was about 15 years ago. And so it really, meeting my husband Eric, who's from Sweden, is how I ended up in Somalia. He was based there and working for a non-governmental organization. And so, we got married about a year and a half after we met, and that's how I ended up in Somalia. So, that then led me on this journey of trying to figure out what to do with my life and my job, because I wasn't teaching anymore. But I got a job with an NGO, a Danish NGO, the Danish demining group, which was the mine action unit of the Danish Refugee Council, as their education advisor. And I was in charge of their East Africa portfolio and traveled all over East Africa, managing their education programs until October of 2011, when everything changed.
So tell us what changed, because I posted on social media. I got like 5 different people. Where can I read about this story? And I know that it's just so far removed from people's lives, and so tell us how you were kidnapped by pirates.
Yeah, I know it is. It's weird. It's not something I ever thought I was gonna experience or have to talk about. But in at that time and in that part of the world, maybe some of your audience remember the Captain Phillips movie. Tom Hanks, I think, was starred in that, and it was like a ship that had been overtaken by pirates in the Indian Ocean. Well, that was kind of the area that I was working in. And after that particular situation, and I believe they were held for like 4 days on their ship, and SEAL team, I'm not sure which SEAL team actually came in and rescued them, but they were rescued by military intervention. And there were all of these, there were several, I guess I should say, ships or yachts that had been overtaken by pirates in the Indian Ocean. And after that Captain Phillips situation, the piracy started moving from the water onto land. And so aid workers started becoming more of the target. A couple of Spanish girls were taken out of a refugee camp that they were working in northeastern Kenya. And that happened like a couple of weeks before my incident. And I think it was just like happening in real time. So we didn't really know that it was quite that serious of a security threat. But I had gone to the southern part of Somalia to check on an office that we had in a project that we were running down there. And I was training the staff, and my counterpart, an older Danish gentleman named Paul, was in charge of that group. And I had canceled the training twice before because I didn't feel good about it. I had this like gut feeling that something was off. And I called him up a couple of days before I was supposed to go down there and said, hey, I just don't feel good about this. And he basically was like, well, if you don't come down here and get your job done, then we'll find somebody else who will. So I felt, backed into a corner. And in that part of the world and in that kind of work, you do have to kind of measure your personal security and safety with your paranoia. And I, at that time in my life, was very much playing the part of letting other people make decisions for me. And so I ignored my intuition and I got on a plane and went down there. And so that would have been like the end of October 25th, 2011. I was on my 3rd day of training, and I was particularly worried about that day because we had to actually leave the office that we were staying in and working in. And I knew from other like security trainings that I had participated in that usually if you're in transit, like that's when you're most vulnerable. And so we made it to the southern office, did our training, finished up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A convoy of 3 armed vehicles comes to pick us up, armed guards in the front, armed guards in the back. And then Paul and I get into the middle vehicle, and we have a Somali guy who's driving, and then our Somali security advisor for the organization, a man named Abdurizak, gets in the back next to me. We drive through the gates of the compound, and for about 10 minutes, we're driving through the town of Galkayo. And, I'm not really paying attention. I'm just thinking about, like stupid stuff that you think about when you're done with work, right? Like, what am I gonna have for dinner? And, can I get my workout in before, stupid stuff. And then this car comes, like another Land Cruiser comes rushing, like roaring around the right side, and cuts us off and splashes mud up all over the windows and the windshield of our vehicle. And I can't see out the windows anymore. And I remember looking up, saying out loud, "What a jerk, who drives like that?" And then I can hear all of this shouting, and there's a crack of the butt of an AK-47 on the car hood. And then I knew something was really wrong. And Abdurizak's door is pulled open, and there's a guy, a really angry looking guy wearing a police uniform, standing there, and he has an AK-47. And he pulls Abdurizak out, climbs in, puts the gun to my head, and starts screaming at the driver to drive. And that really just became like this slide into, I feel like it's like in a whole other dimension, like we drove for hours, and we kept stopping and changing personnel, and we drove some more, and we would stop, and more people, would get in the car, we'd be forced into other vehicles. And then, we did this for hours. And then at some point in the middle of the night, they forced us out of the vehicle and ordered us to walk out into the desert. And I believed that we were going to be executed. And so it was like a death. For me, it felt like a death march. But we walked out into the middle of the desert, and we're surrounded by all of these armed men. And then they just tell us to go to sleep. They want us to just like lay down in the dirt and go to sleep. And it's really interesting how your body and your mind want to protect you. It knows that you are not safe, but it shut down, and I just like completely passed out and fell asleep in the dirt.
And so then you were actually held captive for 93 days until the president at the time ordered your rescue to the Navy SEALs. What was that time like, and what was going on in your mind?
Well, it was very long. 93 days, in retrospect, is not a long time to be held hostage. These things can take like years to resolve, typically. A military intervention is not a normal way to resolve something like this. It's usually going to be a ransom. I was taken for a ransom. That was the only reason we were taken. And they demanded $45 million at the very beginning, which is like, impossible. And I think, I experienced every emotion there is to experience in the human experience within those 93 days. I have never felt hope the way I have felt it in that time. I've never felt despair, I think, the way I have felt it. I have never felt so much rage in my life as I did in moments when we were trying to negotiate on our own behalf, trying to reason with these guys. Some of them were just crazy. Some of them were most of them were stoned. They were high on pot, which is this plant that they chew. They're traumatized. They are not able, you can't reason with them. You can't even talk to them. I was starved. I lost 40 pounds in the 93 days that I was out there. And I was hit a lot. I was not, people will say to me, well, did they treat you badly? And I'm like, yeah, they treated me badly. Like they were pirates who wanted $45 million. Like yeah, they were not nice to me. Um, I slept on the ground every night. Like we were outside the entire 93 days. We were never taken into a house or a shelter or even anything temporary, like a tent or a tarp. We sat or laid under trees or bushes for 12 hours during the day, and then we slept out in the open on mats at night. It was really, really difficult. It was physically, I think, probably one of the hardest things I've had to go through. I don't know. I'm trying to like judge that against childbirth, but because it just went on and on and on. I think mentally, of course, spiritually, emotionally, all of it, like it stretched me to the brink of insanity in some moments. And I think it was really important for me to try to hold on to my mind. I was really aware and very scared. I think that was probably the thing that I was most afraid of out of everything other than dying. I was afraid I was going to lose my mind. And so I took great care and great intention to safeguard my mind as much as I could. And, I think it's interesting now, like looking back and talking about it so much and reflecting on it, and really digging into some of the things that I did to guard myself and keep my mind safe. And I think they're just natural, like human reactions. And you'll find, like, if you read survivor stories, like a lot of people do the same things. It's really interesting how we're wired. But for me, I tend to like have a inclination towards the spiritual. And so I like to, probably over philosophize things. But I woke up probably like halfway through the captivity and realized that I was actually being presented with an incredible opportunity, because I had all this time that I would never have again in my life if I survived. And so I did this, like this memory kind of activity, if you will, where I went back through my life and did like a life review. And I really believe that because of that, I was able to deal with some things that I have been putting off. And I think I always say that it was like the time where I actually met myself. Because there was nothing there. There were no distractions. There was nothing but just empty space. And I think that I have come to understand that, those moments, sometimes they feel like they're going to go on forever. Those are really opportunities for us to meet ourselves, who we really, really are, what we're really made of, and the limits at which we are capable of going to. So yeah, I think it was an interesting time, that's for sure.
I can only imagine. I did just give birth, so you're relating it to childbirth, of which was more physically strenuous. I guess I can relate to, although it's so different. But it's interesting because my first birth lasted like 70 hours, and I ended up having to transfer from a birth center to a hospital, and that's all I had to reference for my second birth. And my second birth was also kind of dramatic. The biggest storm in the history of my town rolled in on my due date. I was planning a home birth, and long story short, we ended up having to leave the mountain for 12 days, came back, baby was super late, but then I went into labor and it was so painful. I just remember thinking, this is this has to be more painful than my last birth.
Mm.
It just can't last as long as before. And I started to like sort of lose it a little bit. I was really second guessing my decision because I was like, I cannot do this for days. And then I realized how much faster it was going. It only ended up lasting 3 hours of active labor, thank God. But my point is that it reminds me of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where it's that seeking the meaning of something that really helps you to survive something. And with childbirth, I think that's the difference, is that it's already got its meaning for the most part.
Yeah.
Also, once I realized it wasn't going to last days, that's when my adrenaline kicked in, and it was so much more manageable than the time I was swimming in my own mind, like, how long is this going to last? And I can only imagine you having no idea when this is going to end or how it's going to end or if it's going to end would be traumatic on its own. And so I'm curious, though, tell me about when you were rescued. What was that period of time like? Because now clearly you have found meaning in this and you have used it to bring out hope and inspire other people and really reflect, like you said you did with your life experiences while you were there. But how long did it take you to really unravel that and create this personal mission from it?
So interesting, because I had a client session this morning, and she's like 2 years into her recovery or healing journey, let's say, and experiencing deep grief, deep loss, and you know, it's like that old adage, you can't compare your beginning to someone else's like ending, kind of. And you know, that was what she was asking me, like, well, how long did it take you to get to this point? Like, basically, how long is it going to take me, you know, to where I can get to where you're at? And I'm like, oh, it's never over. Like, this is my journey. Once you hit one mountaintop and you summit that and you put your flag on the top and you feel like you conquered something, you look over and you are like, shoot, there's a whole other mountain range I'm going to have to climb. But what happens is, you know, and I love the mountain metaphor. You say you live on a mountain. I feel like my healing has definitely been precipitated by long hikes on the Appalachian Trail with my dad and my family. And is why I called my book, my second book, Deserts to Mountaintops. But like, you get stronger, right? You know, you get more clear. With every mountain you climb, you are able to learn something new about yourself, and you get tired, but you learn how important rest is and how much you need in terms of rehabilitation and rejuvenation and repair. And so the next mountain that you are going to be faced with, because this is life, this is what it's about. It's not ever smooth sailing. It's about continuing to trust that the universe is gonna, you know, help you along your way. And so I don't think it's over yet, you know. I think I'm just gonna keep hiking my way to whatever is next, and I'll just keep working at the healing thing, because there's always something. You peel one layer and then there's something else, you know. I mean, I kind of chuckle sometimes. I say I have more trauma than just the kidnapping. You know, I've taken the last 10 years to try to heal and figure this thing out, but there's lots more to uncover there. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, you know, I'm just trying to get an insight into your mind, and I totally relate because I've gone through my own trauma and I have the big story of my life. But in this given moment, I'm living a whole different story, you know, like there's other things that maybe if I said them out loud wouldn't seem like such a big deal, but feel like a big deal while I'm dealing with it. There are other things where it feels like a big deal because of what I've gone through in the past. And so
Yeah.
it's like life is always reflecting back to me a different reflection of where I am and what is next to work on. So the journey is
Mhm.
never over, despite what it looks like, or
Yeah.
despite how a pretty bow is tied on, a
Yeah.
completed book or or
Yep.
a keynote talk or whatever it is. I was recently
Mhm.
interviewing Cheryl Strayed, and she was saying the same thing where I and I loved this aspect because a lot of my trauma was from really poor decisions that I made,
Mhm.
and really realizing, like, yes, I was victimized in certain situations, but this version of me, this version of Melissa, would also never get herself into a lot of those different situations. And
Yeah.
so, yes, I was victimized, but also I put myself in a lot of situations that made it more likely that I would be. And so,
Yeah.
and there have been times where I've looked back on my life with regret for some of those decisions.
Mhm.
Even knowing what I know and even knowing how it created the person I am, I'm like, really? I had to learn that hard of a way.
Yeah.
And I related to
Yeah.
when you said in your book how you took the scenic route. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
mine has a lot of scenery that I did not want to see.
Yeah,
And so,
that resonates for sure, for
and
sure. But you've learned them, right? Like
yes.
I don't know. Sometimes there's some of us that need to be, I always say, the universe took me out into the desert to shake me up, to wake me up to my life. And in a sense, it was a very loving act, because I learned how to be inextricably connected, to my gut and to my intuition. And if I hadn't gone through that experience, I would still be making decisions, I think, that um, would be for others.
Yeah, and I love the theme through your work about self-abandonment because
Mm-hmm.
there's something about that term where I've taught about intuition, how to connect to it, what it looks like when you don't,
Mm,
but the idea that not listening to our intuition is a form of self-abandonment, for
mm-hmm.
some reason that hits a little bit deeper because it really shows the stakes of what there is to lose versus even what there is to gain if you are not abandoning yourself.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I think about that morning when I stood there and looked at myself in the mirror. I knew something was going to happen. I knew something was off. I knew I wasn't supposed to be leaving that house and getting in that car and going on that mission. And I remember, oh man, just as clear as day, I remember the dress I was wearing, looking at myself in the mirror, and I said out loud, Jess, do you want to do this? I knew the answer was no, but I was so afraid of what other people would think of me. I was afraid of looking like a moron, or pathetic, or, paranoid, being a hysterical woman in the field, and, all the things. And I took one last look at myself and I walked away. Like I abandoned myself in that moment. I walked away from myself, and it was the most important decision I've ever made in my life because it changed the trajectory of my life. And, I'm just so fortunate to be here and to be alive, and to have gotten to learn that lesson. Because, I mean, I could have died over and over and over again.
When we're pushing towards a career path or trying to make a name for ourselves, so often we hear to, push through our fear or to not let fear stop us. How do you differentiate between pushing through that fear so that you can basically make a bigger life for yourself or do greater things than you thought were possible versus the intuitive fear or the intuitive thought of maybe this isn't a good idea? How do you differentiate between pushing through that fear so that you can basically make a bigger life for yourself or do greater things than you thought were possible versus the intuitive fear or the intuitive thought of maybe this isn't a good idea?
Mm. I was recently introduced to this. I guess you could call it a concept, of, my intuition? Is it an intuitive thought, or is it an intrusive thought? And I had never really contemplated the difference between those two things. But I've been really reflecting on that. And I think for me, the difference comes into clarity. If it's an intrusive thought, then it's going to be cloaked in shame and unworthiness. I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. It's based on what other people are thinking about disappointing other people. It's very other, like, and not in the good way, others oriented. But when it comes to like intuition, I feel like that pushing through comes down to like self-belief, right? And embracing and accepting our own worthiness around something. I didn't, at that point in my life, I didn't have the connection to myself, and I didn't have the self-love developed within myself to just stand up. I've learned now that if you don't stand up for yourself, you've already lost some, because you think you're going to lose something, you've already lost something anyway.
So it seems like the kind of female empowered push through would have been the standing up for yourself. Which I sadly know what that feels like, where I always joke that when I'm getting massages, for some reason, I have like the inability to like say, go harder or softer. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt their feelings and tell them they're not doing it perfectly. So I just sit there, and then the whole time my mind is just like, just tell her to go a little harder. It's not that big of a deal.
I totally know what that's like. Or I talk to them, or I like make eye contact, and then they start talking to me and telling me about their lives. And then the whole massage, I'm like, oh my God, I just want to take a nap. So like... yeah, I hear you.
And so when you realized, like, that was where I went wrong, that's what I should have been listening to, was that voice. From that day forward, was that connection just more innate, or was it something that you had to develop?
Oh no, we had to repair our relationship, myself and I. We sure did. I think, when I got out and I was able to get like back on my feet, there was a bit of a fear that maybe I had broken my intuition or something, like that it didn't work anymore. And so I had to practice. Like, you have to practice listening to your intuition. That is something that, yes, we're born with and it's innate, but culture and society tries to stamp that out of us. And so we have to relearn that, especially as women. And so that, for me, has looked like a lot of silence. You cannot hear your own heart if there's so much distraction, and there's so much otherness, and there's so much busyness all around. Like, I learned that in the desert because I spent all this time in silence, to the point where I thought I was going to go insane. But I've gotten now like really used to that and crave it. And of course, I don't spend 12 hours in silence anymore. Sometimes I wish I still got the chance to do that, but this is not my life. But I think you have to practice and get really clear on what is in alignment with you, and what you want. And I still get it wrong sometimes, but I am like coming to realization more quickly than I used to. And just, it gets easier to say, hey, I'd like a little more pressure when you're, working on my back, when you're getting a massage every time you do it, like with anything, it just takes practice.
I actually do practice that. I have a massage tomorrow. And I was standing in the mirror yesterday, and I'm like, this is how you're going to say it. I learned that it becomes much easier to say no when you actually practice your little phrasings of how you're going to do it. And then it becomes a neural pathway that you can default to. Yep. And so it sounds so silly, but those little things that I have a hard time saying, as small as they are, I have to practice in the mirror or figure out a word choice or figure out the energy I'm going to hold while I have that.
Well, don't you think when you do the small things that it gets easier to do the hard things?
Yes. Yes, it does. And I don't even realize that I've leveled myself up until a hard thing comes up and I'm like, "Oh, I breezed through that a lot easier than I would
Mm-hmm.
have in
Mm-hmm.
the past." But I've also learned that with my intuition, because I did the same thing. I spent so many years cutting off my voice, cutting off my body. I was bulimic for 10 years. I
Mm-hmm.
got myself into a lot of horrible situations with bad people
Mm-hmm.
and I came to the same conclusion as you where I was living my life based on what other people thought. I was deciding what was success was, what cool was, how I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
look even based
Mm-hmm.
on what I heard, what my feedback was
Mm-hmm.
generally.
Mm-hmm.
And that started to change when yeah, it was the same thing when I found myself isolated and not by choice. It was more that I had ruined my life enough that I had to move and start over and it was those times of solitude because I've used the analogy before where like say you were dating someone new and every time you got together you just went to the movies and then he dropped you off at home. You could date the person for 3 years and never really know anything about him. And I think that so many people, so many of us do that same things with the same thing with ourselves, where
Mm-hmm.
we think, well, of course I know me. But how many of us have said, oh, this person knows me better than I know myself? Why
Mm-hmm.
is that? Are you not taking the time to reflect on your own patterns so you don't even know why or what you like, what you don't
Mm-hmm.
like? And I found myself in that spot. And so it's like I needed to have dialogue with me. I needed to ask myself questions and let the answer arise because the default answer that was going to arise was going to be based on everybody else rather than
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. Yep. That totally resonates. And it's when we are brought down to our knees, right? Or, like we find ourselves in a desert. That is when it's like, okay, well, it's time to get to know this girl and help her along if we want to survive.
So tell me about how you safeguarded your mind while you were in that time. You talked about sort of reflecting on your life. What did that look like?
Well, I mean, I got really organized and I got really detailed and I made a work plan for myself. And so I decided that every day I was going to take 1 year, or maybe it could go into 2 days, but I was going to go back as far as I could remember, um, and like remember everything that had ever happened to me in my life, like the good, the bad, the beautiful things, the ugly things, all of it. And I had lost my mom a year before this, and I'd lost her very suddenly and tragically. And so I was like really in the throes of my own grief still. And I had actually been thinking about, ironically, after this trip, when I was planning when I got back to let my organization know that I was going to take a sabbatical. I was going to take a couple of months off, and I don't know, I was like in my early 30s, so I thought, I'll go to India and sit in an ashram somewhere and like just gut it out, right? I was like meditate and yoga and cry and intermittently eat some vegetarian food and just move through my grief. And I woke up one morning like 45 or 50 days into captivity. So it took me a while to like for my nervous system, I think, to regulate enough so that I could actually like come up with some ideas and some solutions. But I I was really into yoga at the time, and I had moved my mat from the field where I was sleeping to under the tree that I was going to spend the next 12 hours under. And I was like doing my yoga stretches, and I was sitting cross-legged under this tree, and I leaned back against it, and I had this enlightenment, really, this moment of realization. And I thought, didn't the Buddha reach enlightenment while he was sitting under a tree? And didn't Jesus like wander the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, like grappling with like really important decisions. And I kept thinking of like all of the religions that I had ever studied or heard about, and how there was always this moment, right? Like where they were in a place of self-sacrifice, or like their felt needs were not being met, and they were struggling. They were wrestling with themselves, and so I decided that I had a choice, because that's a really big thing for me, is the difference between options and a choice. Like I didn't have many options. I like had zero options in terms of what to do. In while was sitting, I couldn't go anywhere, but I had a choice as to what I could think about. And so that's when I decided to do this life review. And like, for example, when I was 4, one of my first memories is of my mom taking me to the movie theater for the first time. And she was wearing a blue sundress with little white flowers, and her skin was all suntanned. And I remember the freckles on her arms and the shape of her teeth when she laughed. And we went to go see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And on and on, like just these memories like of my childhood kept pouring out of me, and like some really hard stuff. And then I got to, like, weeks went by where I was just like in it. I would go sit under this tree and I would just go back to my life, and I was like reliving it. It was like an extraordinary, like I get chills just talking about it now. It was like the most extraordinary, almost transcendental experience. And when I couldn't remember anything else, then I started making plans for the future. I started thinking about, what did I really, really want? Is this the job that I really want to go back to if I get out of here? An organization that doesn't protect me, and pressures me into going into a place that doesn't feel safe. What do I really want to do with my life? What really matters to me? And it's an opportunity to get really honest with yourself, because there is nothing else at stake. All you have is your own honesty and your own feelings about things. And it was really quite extraordinary. And I think I've carried that. I've tried to. I'm not saying I nail it every day, but I do think a lot about the fact that I have a choice as to how I'm going to think about things and how I'm going to frame the things that are happening to me in my day-to-day life, whether I'm stuck in traffic, or I've spilled coffee all over myself, or I didn't get that speaking event that I thought I was going to get, or the client didn't sign, whatever. It has led me down this path of real, I guess, like power, like taking my power back, because I do believe that I have complete control over what I'm thinking about in my mind. And if I could figure out how to do that, being held hostage with guns to my head, then surely I can do it sitting here at my desk in the suburbs of DC. Right?
Yeah, I have thought about just how interesting it is that so many of the almost spiritual modalities, like the ways that people transcend, are very similar to like things that people would never choose for themselves, like fasting. Like you
Right.
talk about fasting to somebody who's being starved and it looks batshit crazy, and then that solitude that you talked about. I've thought about that, how people that are in solitary confinement are likely to lose their minds, but that's also, like, people go on darkness retreats, and you talked about Jesus and Buddha. It's that solitude where there's another path to go down. And so what's it like to choose that, and how many times are we creating the prison in our own minds
Yes.
based on a situation versus the path of hope, which
Mm-hmm.
in your situation was a very extreme example of that. But we do it so often in these little things where, I mean, I do it to myself all the time where all of a sudden I'm like, I want a bigger house, or
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the right time to buy, and then this, and then all of a sudden I feel trapped in, like I have no options. And it's like, what do you mean? You have a
Mm-hmm.
great life. What did you
Yeah.
just create right now?
Mm-hmm.
It clearly wasn't the highlight reel. Like,
Right. It was just all a projection of like, what? I don't know, what things that we're afraid of. Like, sure, I could have sat there under that tree and thought about all the different ways they were going to kill me, but that was not going to serve me in any way. And I wasn't in denial. I mean, trust me, I was very aware that I was surrounded by men who wanted to hurt me with guns, but I had to go somewhere else in my mind in order to keep it. And I didn't, my body wasn't free, but my mind was. I was in charge of it. And I think that, like, we kind of have to look at our minds that way, as we're stewards of it. Like, we have to protect our minds. We have autonomy, over what we let into it. And that is, easier said than done, for sure. And again, I want to like be clear that I do not feel like I have this mastered. But I have had moments where I have seen that play out in my life. And then that would parlay into gratitude, of course. Everybody talks about gratitude, but it's so true, when I felt really, really low, I would reach for something, reach for a higher thought, reach for something to be grateful for. Sometimes it was real pathetic, like, I'm really glad my toenail didn't fall off today. I mean, just something. But I made myself find something to be grateful for, and I still do that now. Like, when I'm starting to feel my vibration drop and get really low about something, I'm like, nope. Okay, let's find something to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my health. Blah, blah. Yeah, sure. I'm grateful for my health. Well, you know what? Tomorrow I might wake up and not feel healthy. And then I'm sure going to wish I was grateful for my health the day before. Right. So I just think that we do create our own reality and our own experience, no matter where we're at.
so now, with everything that you've learned and your relationship with your intuition now, how do you determine the things that you really want versus maybe a different kind of story that you're telling yourself? Because I know for me, I even get overwhelmed with the options that I have. And it takes me a while to be like, no, this is what I really want, because I can create a dream scenario for almost anything.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes back to that, well, I've seen this other person be successful and happy in this. I've seen this, and it's like, yeah, but what's lighting my fire? What is it that gets me in my own unique way? How do you decipher that?
I think it's about what makes me feel good. Our feelings are information, right? I think really, really important information. And really all I want is to feel good. All I want is to feel free. What are the things that bring me that feeling? I don't know. That changes. And I think it's different for everybody, but you're asking me about me, so I can only speak for me. When I feel genuinely grateful for everything I have, when I feel at ease and in flow, when I'm not worried or anxious about what's next in my business, or how I'm going to pay that bill, or whatever, that to me is like, that's the stuff. Like, that's where I want to be residing all the time. And I'm learning so much about just like surrendering that outcome. Still, I feel like I got a lot of really clear direction and lesson during the captivity. And if ever there was like a visualization or a manifestation that came true, it would be the rescue. Because I couldn't have even planned that out. That was just miraculous, really. But I use that, I guess, as a baseline too, to say like, well, if that could happen, then sure, so could all the other things, right? And I think we all have some sort of baseline like that in our lives if we look for it.
Yeah, and instead, so often we are looking for the things that went wrong. We are remembering the things that went wrong. We're letting that create our vision for the future.
Yeah.
It's
I think we look for proof that it's not going to work out.
yes.
But how about we start looking for proof when it did,
Yeah,
focusing on that?
I have a goal setting, a spiritual goal setting masterclass in my membership, and that was probably the biggest step that I did when I actually started reaching my goals versus talking myself out of them for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believed, I was like, I think I wasted all my willpower on high school and college because I felt like I could not accomplish a big goal. And then I'm like, well, wait, actually, what did I have in high school and college that I don't have now? I'm not creating a structure for myself. I'm not watching, there's not a healthy competition with a bunch of people around me. I'm not like constantly checking my grades and seeing how I'm succeeding or whatever it was. And a big step for me was sitting there and writing down all of my accomplishments, all of the proof that I could do something big. And when I started to write, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to write. I didn't have that belief of myself. And by the time I was done, I'm like, how did all of these things not come top of mind immediately? I know these things. I lived these things. And at the end of just that exercise, I all of a sudden my goal was going to happen, and I knew it was going to happen, and it did happen. And so just taking the time to choose which of our memories are top of mind can make such a big difference on what we're willing to do in our next step.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's amazing. You know, I mean, I do the same things, right? Like, I have goals, professional goals that I'm really focused on, and when they feel very far away, and our mind wants to, because it wants to keep us safe, right? And it wants to stay comfortable, and it wants to stay in what it knows. And my mind anyway knows, that, oh, I shouldn't try to, level up, or try to, move to that next thing because it feels too scary. And so it's always looking for proof of failure. When in fact, I have a lot of proof that I'm not a failure. I mean, and I think it took me a while to like understand that, but I remember actually it was like a social thing where I was subjected to some mean girl stuff in adulthood, which I like seriously didn't know that was still a thing. And I remember I was driving home by myself. I was feeling really bad, and I just looked in the rear view mirror, and I looked myself again in the eyes, and I was like, you're Jessica, insert whatever expletive you want, Buchanan, and you stood up to dozens of pirates with guns. Like, you can stand up to a few suburban mean moms. Like, come on. So I think, yeah, like, you need to go back. I love the making the list thing, to if you need proof, go sit down and make a list of what a badass you are, because I guarantee you got at least 20 things.
Just comparing the suburban moms to Somali pirates. It's
I mean, it's real. That battle's real. I know you got your audience out there gets that.
I don't understand how somebody could be the mean girl mom that's mean to the person who was once kidnapped by pirates. Really? Hasn't she gone through enough?
I mean, haven't we all? We're just all scared, right? We're scared. We're all, I think a lot of us are operating out of fear, and then it's amazing to be able to have conversations like this, because it's like, oh, there's another way, right? Yeah. We don't have to be so afraid.
Well, I love to leave listeners with an action item to kind of focus on for this week, to bring some of what we've learned in this interview grounded into the reality. If you were to give them one practice that just helps them be less likely to self-abandon or increase their intuition, what would that practice be?
So I'm not popular when I say this, but I feel like this is a game changer in my life, personally and professionally. It's get up early. Get up earlier before your kiddos or, whatever. Get up with some intention and create a ceremony first thing in the morning. Honor the universe that you woke up for another day. Honor yourself that you got up, and I have a very sacred start that I protect and do every morning without fail. And I think that it's composed of all kinds of different practices: journaling, meditating, visualizing, affirmations, pulling my tarot cards, all the things. But, if you don't have a morning practice, just start by getting up 15 minutes before you normally do, and sitting with your cup of coffee and just set one intention about how you want your day to go.
I am religious about my morning practice. I've kept it through having 2 children. And so I know when people are like, but how do I do this with kids? I know it's harder, but even when I'm sleep deprived, that morning start sets the tone for my whole day. And so the difference of being sleep deprived and even just an extra 15 minutes versus being sleep deprived and then waking up to chaos.
Yeah.
It's just
waking up in chaos,
yes.
Like, yeah, I just can't even imagine, like, yeah, because I did that with my littles too. Now they get big very fast, just FYI. But yeah, I think that, oh my gosh, it's life-changing. If you want to change your life, get up early.
So
it's
true.
It's that easy and also very hard, but it's so worth it. So worth it.
Well, for listeners that are resonating with this conversation and want to learn more about your story and the stories you've compiled with other women, where's the best place they can connect, and tell us about your books?
Oh, thanks. So I have 2 websites. I have jessbuchanan.com, and then desertstomountaintops.com. I have a publishing company, so I only represent women who are writing memoir manifestos. They've been through something, now they know something, and now they want to teach us something. And so what we specialize in actually is curating anthologies. And so we are just starting our second anthology this week. It's Deserts to Mountaintops, choosing our healing through radical self-acceptance. And we'll be working with about 17 or 18 co-authors who are writing on that theme. And then in January, we had our first anthology come out, Deserts to Mountaintops, our collective journey to reclaiming our voice, 25 women's stories of how they have journeyed from the desert of self-abandonment to the mountaintop of self-love. And the stories are really beautiful. They're very profound and they're very diverse. They're as different as the authors are from each other. And it just feels like really meaningful storytelling, very healing, offers a chance for transformation, I believe. And I'm very proud of it.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/304. Your challenge for this week is to just listen to your inner voice. Set your intention to have your mind aware of the inner voice at all times. Really listen for it. And keep in mind, until we build that relationship, we might not hear it just speaking to us. So sit in stillness and ask yourself questions. Allow the answers to rise as though you trust that you actually have those answers inside of you. Trust the wisdom that comes up. This is how you start to build your relationship with your inner voice. This is how you start to actually build the strength of your inner voice so that it pops up more often. That inner voice is our built-in guidance system. It always has our highest good in mind. So this week, just get in touch with it and let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. Don't forget about the Mind Love membership at mindlove.com/membership. There are over a dozen masterclasses. There's meditations. This month's meditation is amazing. I've already gotten a ton of feedback on how powerful this yoga nidra for deep sleep is. So I'm really excited to share all that's in store at mindlove.com/membership. You can find my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.